we're going to show you how to stitch out the Hope block, and this is our stained glass window, part of that collection, and this is Hope. And let me show you what you need in order to make the block. The supplies that you'll need for your Hope block is you'll have to do a little spray starch on your fabric, so we like the Mary Ellen spray starch. You'll need some type of temporary spray adhesive to put your backing on. You'll need your hoop scissors to cut your fabric in the hoop, your trimmer by George 2.0 for trimming the blocks after they're finished. And as far as the fabric in that goes, you're going to need your fabric 1, your fabric 2, you're going to need fabric 4, fabric 5, and you will need your fabric for your lead and your stained glass, and also your backing fabric. And then you'll cut a piece of battleizer big enough to fit in your hoop. And the threads you'll need is you'll need a water-soluble thread, you'll need a embroidery bobbin thread, you'll need thread B in a matching bobbin, and your thread D in a matching bobbin, and of course some way to transfer the design to the machine. So let's start stitching.
Step 1, you're going to hoop your battleizer, and you're going to place neutral thread in the needle and embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and the machine is going to stitch the design outline. For step 2, you're going to place your fabric 1 right side up, and your machine is going to stitch a tack down. You're going to do this with water-soluble thread in the needle, and then you're going to trim 1/4 of an inch on the inside of the block and leave approximately 1/2 an inch on the outside of the block. And the next step for 3, you're going to put neutral thread in the needle only, and you're going to place your black lead fabric right side down over fabric 1, and the machine will stitch a seam. And then you're going to flip your lead fabric right side up and sew the tack down stitch. Now we're going to place our fabric 2 right side down, raw edges even, and we're going to stitch a seam. Now we're going to trim a little bit, 1/4 of an inch inside there. You can do that after step 4. We didn't do that, but now we think we need to go back and do that as we have black lead fabric and a lighter yellow fabric. So we're going to trim that up a little bit. And step 6, we're going to flip our fabric 2 right side up and give it a little finger press. And here Linda's doing a little trim beforehand so that fabric isn't hanging out while we're sewing. And we'll take it back to the machine, and the machine stitches a tack down stitch. And now we're just going to do a little trimming. Inside the block, we're going to trim a scant 1/4 inch. And for step 7, you're going to place your black lead fabric right side down. Well, as soon as Linda's done trimming, she'll do that. Okay, now we're going to place our black lead fabric right side down, raw edges even, and the machine sews the seam. And for step 8, you're going to flip your lead fabric right side up, finger press, and the machine will stitch a tack down stitch. And then if you need to, if necessary, you can trim a scant 1/4 inch. Here you see us placing fabric 5 right side down, raw edges even. Machine stitches the seam. Then we flip the fabric up, and the machine stitches a tack down stitch. We're going to trim a scant 1/4 inch on the inside of the block, leaving 1/2 an inch on the outside of the block. We did that tack down, by the way, with water-soluble thread. Step 11, you're going to put neutral thread back in the needle, place your lead fabric, it sews a seam. Step 12, you're going to flip the fabric, finger press, and it stitches a tack down. And then, if necessary, you can trim 1/4 inch inside the block. Step 13, you're going to place your fabric 5 right side down, and the machine stitches a seam. Step 14, you're going to need to place water-soluble thread in the needle because we're stitching on the outside perimeter of the block, and then the machine will sew a tack down stitch. And then here we're going to cut a scant 1/4 inch inside the block and leave a 1/2 inch or so on the outside of the block. For step 15, you're going to put neutral thread in the needle only and place your lead fabric right side down, and the machine will sew a seam. And then in step 16, you're going to flip your lead fabric right side up and finger press, and the machine stitches a tack down stitch. And then you can trim a scant 1/4 inch inside the block if necessary, leaving a 1/2 inch or so on the outside of the block. And for step 17, you're going to place your fabric 4 right side down, raw edges even, and the machine will sew a seam. And then you'll need to have water-soluble thread in the needle only. You'll flip your fabric 4 right side up and sew the tack down. And you shouldn't need to do any trimming there. For step 19, you're going to spray your backing fabric, the wrong side of it, with some temporary spray adhesive, and you're going to center it over the block on the back side. And you're just going to flip it over and give it a little press, and then it will sew a basting stitch around the perimeter of the block to attach the backing fabric. Step 20, you're going to put thread B in the needle end in the bobbin. If you have an automatic thread cutting feature on your machine, you'll need to turn it off and bring your bobbin thread to the top before you start stitching the quilting. That'll make for a nicer, prettier looking back of your block. Don't you wish your machine can sew that fast? For step 21, you're going to put thread D in the needle end in the bobbin, and you're going to sew the remaining quilting. And again, you're with the automatic thread cutter off, bringing your bobbin thread to the top for a prettier back. And that is the last step for Hope. Now we're going to show you how to do Hope, the whole cloth version. You need to refer to your instructions on what size to cut your fabrics and what threads you'll need. Step 1, you're going to hoop your battleizer, and you're going to place neutral thread in the needle and embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and the machine will sew a placement outline. Step 2, you're going to place water-soluble thread in the needle only. You're going to spray the wrong side of your backing fabric and adhere it to the back of your hoop, centering it over that placement stitch. Then you're going to turn it over and you're going to add your fabric 1, centering that over the placement stitch. can use a little temporary spray adhesive on the fabric on the front also if you want to. Then we're going to bring it to the machine, and with the water-soluble thread, the machine will stitch the basting stitch. This will adhere your front and backing fabric to your battleizer. For step 3, the embroidery thread that you choose to do your quilting will be matching both in the needle and the bobbin. If you have a machine that has an automatic thread cutter, you'll want to turn it off. You'll want to bring your bobbin thread to the top, and the machine will sew all the beautiful quilting. And again, I wish my machine really did sew that fast. And that's basically how you do a whole cloth version of Hope. Alright, this is our completed Hope block, and I just noticed a thread to trim. We're going to show you how to trim it up so you can put your blocks together. We're going to assume that this particular corner, it could be any corner you like, but this one is going to have the binding. So we're going to trim through all layers 1/4 inch from the basting line. So we'll use our trimmer by George 2.0, turn it over, and we have our bolded 1/4 inch line. Place it on the basting line and trim through all layers 1/4 inch. Other two edges are going to be joined to other blocks. So on these edges, we need to turn back the front layer, the top layer, turn the trimmer over so the metal edge is going to butt up against the turned over front edge. And we're rotary cutting off just the battleizer and the backing. Any edge that you join to another block, this is how you'll trim it. You'll trim off all the battleizer and the backing, so the back will look like that. And then on the front side, you'll turn the trimmer over again and place your 1/4 inch line on your basting line. So we now have a nice seam allowance for the front. So there's our Hope block, trimmed and ready to stitch. Here we have our Hope block all stitched and trimmed up, or the threads are trimmed up, and we're going to trim it so we can join it into our quilt. We're going to assume that this corner is going to be the corner of our quilt, so I'm going to trim 1/4 inch through all layers from the basting line. So our trimmer by George 2.0, turn it over, line up your 1/4 inch line with your basting line. Trim through all layers. So any edge of your block that you're going to have binding on, this is what you'll do. And because we're using a different joining method on this block, we're going to trim these two edges will be joined to other edges of the block. The first half of it is you'll turn back the front edge, the top layer of the quilt, put your trimmer metal edge up against it. Completely remove your battleizer and your backing. Now we have extra fabric here because instead of 1/4 inch, we're going to cut a 3/4 inch. So I've used my little highlighter tape, and on my ruler, I placed the highlighter tape right along the 3/4 inch line. I did that because if you have to trim a lot of these blocks, especially with my black printing on my ruler and my black fabric, it's really quick and easy to have that highlighter line lined up for you. It's right on the 3/4 inch, so we'll trim this to a 3/4 inch seam allowance. So the front of your block will look like that. These edges are for binding, these edges are for joining, and the back will look this way. It's hard to see it because it's all black, but there's your battleizer all trimmed off.